My name is Manuel Ferreira Duarte. I was born in the island of Pico in the Azores in 1936. I moved to the island of Fale, which is the island next to Pico, where my parents were working and living, and there I studied and being there until I went to the Portuguese Army in 1957. Upon my release, I came back and I got a job with an American company there in Fayal. I worked there since 1959 until 1963, when I was transferred to the Caribbean, where the company had stations there and they need personnel with technical knowledge of the equipment they used there at that time. So first I went to Curacao. From there I went to Venezuela, and then I worked in Santo Domingo, actually during the revolution there in 1966. I went back to Venezuela. From there I came to the Virgin Islands and to Puerto Rico. I worked there until 1971, when I decided to experiment life here in California. So first I went to the Central Valley. I worked in a chicken processing plant for a while. Then I was invited to join a Portuguese fraternal society to sell insurance. I came to Santa Clara Valley in 1972, early in 72. I worked with them for a couple of years, but I couldn't make it, so I decided to join my old company, which had a station in San Francisco. I worked there until the 80s, when the new technologies make the company's presence obsolete. So at that time, I came to Santa Clara again. Well, I lived in Santa Clara all the time, but I decided to stay around here and jump from job to job for a while. Work for a newspaper, work for some electronic companies, work for several companies, and in the meantime, this urgency of finding my roots, of making an effort to convey to others the beauty of our culture, made me do a lot of research, and I wrote a book with short stories called The Banda Nova and Other Stories. That in that story I tried to tell the people, the readers, to explain how the Azores, being so far away from California, had made a notch here in this big country that California is. So the short stories lead the reader through the early stages till today's life here. So it tells about our ways. Then I wrote another book, which is this one that I have here, which relates a passage on a sailing boat, 35 feet yacht, from the San Francisco Bay Area to the Azores. It took us 3 months and a half. I went along with 3 other friends. They owned the boat. We were all from the same island, and then I returned to California, been jumping from job to job again, and now I'm about to retire. I'm almost 65. And one thing that I like to do, or to tell also, or add to this statement, is that at one point I have 2 daughters, twin girls, and I was always I always felt the need to, if I could, transmit to my daughters as much as I could about my culture, the culture of my people. And I felt that it would be necessary for them to learn Portuguese, to have access to the Portuguese culture through books, through literature, through those things. So together with other friends, we started a school here in Santa Clara that were at that time we had there was a great interest. We had many students, qualified teachers, and that school still exists, is still doing a pretty good job. And I do believe through my experience working in different countries, cutting bread with different peoples, that we are all the same. We are all the same. We become maybe citizens of the world, but the more we believe that we are citizens of the world, the more important it is to know where we came from. And my need to find out where I came from, the history of my country, so to devote a lot of time to study those things, so I could not only get answers for myself, but that I could also convey that information to others. The presence of the Portuguese in California, namely the presence of the Azorean people in California, could be explained by the fact that the whalers from New England, these ships would stop in the Azores to resupply their fresh foods, fresh water, and after a while they start also to recruit crew members in the islands. As the historian Elliot Morris says, from probably the third part of the 19th century, these whalers would leave the New England ports with skeleton crews, and they would fill their they'll complete their necessary crews, recruiting young people from the islands, namely from the island of Pico, Fayal, Flores, and Corvo. So that was the path that the Azoreans found through the Horn. Of course, the canal was not open at that time, the Panama Canal, so it was very tough. Sometimes those trips would last 3-4 years. So the first Azoreans came on the whalers. Then they came to California, and some start jumping ship. And at one point, when there was the gold rush, it was a collective situation. All sailors abandoned their ships in San Francisco and went searching for gold. So this would be probably the way we can justify the presence here. So we can see, we can actually tell, if we go back to the early 19th century, that those Azoreans were also pioneers in California. They helped to build one way or the other California the way pioneers do. So of course not all came by via of the Horn on board of those ships. Many came leaving the islands and going to Providence, to ports in the East Coast, and then even before the railroad was established, they would come as all the others came across this country on the caravans or in small groups. And so it was a chain of events. They start calling for relatives, and the relatives called their relatives, and here we are almost 1 million. If there are many Portuguese, there are many people with Portuguese ancestry that we can account for them, because in those days they would change their names, they would anglicize their names, so many were lost forever. We cannot track them down, but we are substantial in substantial numbers here in California, and we are all very proud of that. Today we can find the Portuguese all over the state. However, they are concentrated more in the Central Valley. There are many thousands of Portuguese people and Portuguese enterprises in the Central Valley, namely around Turlock in the Tulare County, all over the state, all over the Central Valley, but namely in these two areas as far as I can tell. There is also an important community in San Diego where at one time they also pioneered the tuna industry. They start with small open boats, and they start building better boats, bigger boats. And now, after the industry moved out of San Diego because of ecological problems, they still have big boats, tuna clippers, and they go at this point under other flags sometimes. They go fish in around the Samoa Islands, very far, very deep in the Pacific. At times, in early stage, they were not concentrated, but they could be found in small settlements down the coast. Today, they are concentrated in the Santa Clara Valley. In San Jose, there is a big community. In the area of LA, there is the Artesia. In Artesia, there are many Portuguese, and we can find them actually from Eureka all the way to San Diego. But probably where they are now in the greater numbers, where they concentrate, is Santa Clara Valley, Central Valley, Artesia, and San Diego.
Olha, o meu nome é Teresa Neves e vim aqui para a Califórnia em 1968. Nasci na ilha de São Miguel, Açores. E, portanto, estou aqui mais ou menos já há 33 anos neste país. E depois lá nos Açores tenho recordações da minha juventude, por acaso, muito positivas, muito boas. Como eu vivia numa freguesia chamada Fajão de Baixo, que é mais ou menos muito pertinho de Ponta Delgada, talvez uns 15 minutos de caminhonete de Fajão de Baixo para Ponta Delgada. E, portanto, eu estudei e tive até mais ou menos até o 3º ano lá na Escola Industrial de Ponta Delgada. Mas depois estudar para mim não era assim um sonho muito grande, era um bocado malandra para estudar. E depois, aos 17 anos, meu pai, eu não quis estudar mais, e meu pai disse: ok, tens que ir trabalhar. Só eu fui para Ponta Delgada trabalhar com a tia minha numa orivesaria e depois, por qualquer razão, descobriram que cantava um bocadinho bem e coisa. Uma vez no meu quintal eu fiz umas brincadeiras com as minhas amigas, tinha 12 anos, e convidei os vizinhos para irem ver o nosso teatro que a gente tinha inventado e feito e coisa, e depois convidaram-me para pertencer a um grupo teatral da Casa de Povo da Fajão de Baixo. E portanto, daí principiou a minha vida como amadora, o que fiz teatro e corri a ilha de São Miguel, as freguesias quase todas da ilha de São Miguel, a fazer teatro, que nessa altura o grande revisteiro era José Barbosa. E depois também envolvi-me muito com o grupo folclore de São Miguel, que foi o primeiro grupo folclore que existia na ilha de São Miguel nessa altura, dirigido pelo professor José Bento, que era o professor de dança, também uma pessoa muito ativa na ilha de São Miguel. E também tive 4 anos neste grupo de São Miguel, do grupo folclore da ilha de São Miguel, e continuava a fazer teatro, até que vim aqui para a América. Vim por acaso para a América com o grupo teatral da Casa de Povo da Feijão Baixo, que foi convidado para dar espetáculos lá embaixo na Costa Leste. E então demos muitos espetáculos lá embaixo com as comunidades portuguesas, o que eu adorei. Vi várias partes lá de baixo que me deu a oportunidade de ver e comecei logo a sentir-me confortável na América. Gostei, por qualquer razão comecei-me a sentir que gostava de estar nesse país. Os meus pais vieram à frente de nós já tínhamos mais de 20 anos, e os meus pais vieram à frente e nós viemos 7 meses depois, aqui para a Califórnia. Mas, portanto, depois de dar os espetáculos na Costa Leste, o grupo foi para trás para São Miguel e então eu e a minha irmã viemos para aqui. E aqui ficamos. E ainda aqui estou. Cheguei aqui à América em 68 e depois casei em 69 e ao princípio a vida assim normal, tipo, tive 2 filhos, um filho, uma filha, e depois aquela coisa do teatro começou a nascer dentro de mim outra vez, e depois mais uns anos depois fui convidada para fazer teatro aqui no Portuguese Club, um clube aqui em São José, e comecei a fazer teatro e as pessoas começaram a convidar, e depois comecei a me envolver também muito dentro da comunidade portuguesa. E já há uns anos depois, talvez os meus filhos já eram crescidinhos, então quando eu comecei a envolver-me com a comunidade portuguesa, cantando no grupo coral, que por acaso ainda hoje continuo a cantar, e na liturgia também com uma leitura, e já fui presidente do Conselho Paroquial Português. Continuo a ser envolvida, por acaso até sou secretária neste momento deste grupo paroquial português. Portanto, continuo, o que eu adoro envolver-me com a comunidade portuguesa. Sinto que é parte, apesar de estar mais tempo neste país que eu estive na minha terra, mas sinto-me bastante feliz e realmente preenchida com esta participação que eu dou à comunidade portuguesa. Também sou líder de um grupo que é um grupo que nós temos, que envolve a comunidade portuguesa, que é a partilha da Bíblia. Nos encontramos e de vez em 2 semanas também há um grupo que se reúne e que nós lemos a Bíblia e partilhamos a nossa partilha de fé, o que é muito bom para o crescimento espiritual da comunidade portuguesa. Houve um programa Renew que a Diocese trouxe para várias paróquias aqui desta área da Bahia, e que a comunidade portuguesa se envolver neste grupo, mas que precisava de ser traduzido para português, que não havia materiais portugueses, ou então com a ajuda de outros colegas meus aqui da comunidade portuguesa conseguimos fazer a tradução desses 4 anos de programa para o português. E assim também conseguimos dar a oportunidade à comunidade portuguesa que não domina bem a língua inglesa, em português. Portanto, estou bastante contente de me envolver com a comunidade portuguesa neste momento.
My name is Luís Silveira. I was born on the island of Fale in the Azores. I came here when I was 10 years old in 1968 with my parents. My father is deceased. My mother lives in San Leandro, and I reside in Manteca, California. I have for the last 2 years. One of the things that I remember most vividly about when I was young was when my parents moved from the island of Fayal to the island of Flores. How we were made to feel like we were a very special part of a small family. Not having any blood relatives there, we were welcomed into their hearts and into their homes. And to this day, the friendship that we developed continues. Even though I was a small child, that's one of the things that has brightened my life and has brought me to the Portuguese community, was to continue that tradition that we had. I noticed that in this country, we kind of abandon our families. We go off and make our own lives. In Portugal, you remain close to your family. And as being that I was born home, I like that idea of being close to my family, but close to my friends. And your friends are your family. So remembering my childhood, going to a strange island I think I was probably 6 years old, not knowing anyone, being made to feel like I had brothers and sisters and children to play with. So that is one of the things that I try to work at when I'm working with the Portuguese community here, is to bring that tradition, to maintain the family value. After arriving in the United States, one of the things that we discovered was that there was very little Portuguese-based community. You were either sent out to the valley or you lived in an area where there was nobody that spoke Portuguese. Going to school, I had to learn English. My parents wanted to also learn English. And we had none of the traditional feasts or any of the organizational things that we have now. When those things started, approximately 29 years ago, my father started getting involved in that, and that brought me into it. As a small child, I kind of went because I was told to go. And at first, I resented it because I was trying to become an American. I regret those days now because as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate my heritage, and that's what we try to strive now, is to remember where we came from, knowing where we live, but remembering the traditional roots of our forefathers, remembering that we had sopish and we did dinners and we still helped the people that needed help. So when I became involved in the Portuguese community again, that's what I wanted to do, was to help those that I found were going away from that area. At home you didn't speak any Portuguese. You spoke English. I speak very bad Portuguese. I regret that very much. I would love it if my children spoke Portuguese fluently, but we don't have the schooling that there was. And now as we work towards going back to that, you need people that are in basically my generation to be involved, and that's one of the things that I enjoy doing. Today I find myself involved with an organization called Our Lady of Fatima, which was founded 29 years ago. I've served as director, vice president, president, again now serve as a director. One of the reasons I got involved in that was to bring back the traditional Portuguese festival of celebrating the Holy Ghost and celebrating Our Lady of Fatima. We also do a dinner for the elderly. We do help with maintain the Portuguese school. Something that I find very important, that people that have children that are born here that are second, third generation, at least they should have some basic knowledge of what our language is. I relate to that because I regret the fact that I forgot a lot of the Portuguese that I knew when I came here, and I find that to be very, very important. We are Portuguese. We will always be Portuguese. As far as relating to the American culture, I really find myself out of whack with them. I find that most Americans, at least my perception, is that they're very greedy. They're very into themselves, and I think that's wrong. I hope that my ancestors weren't like that, and I like to think that we weren't, that we were more into helping people. The last trip I went to Portugal, I found that one of the things I admired most about the living, especially on the islands, was the way they treated their elderly. Here, we throw our elderly out to the wind. And one of the things that we do with Our Lady of Fatima is we have a dinner that is specifically for only people that are retired. We bring them, we feed them. When we have a festival, when we give them the traditional sopish, we take it to elderly people that can't come to us. We take it to their home. It may not be something very important, but at least to me, it makes me feel like I'm part of them, and it's bringing them back into our culture and saying that, hey, you are important to us, not just, okay, you're 90 years old, get to hit the road. And that, to me, that's the biggest difference between Portuguese and Americans, is that in Portugal, we respected our elders. In this country, bye, hit the road. One of the most important things for me would be in the future to have our children, my children, remember what it was like back home. So by continuing to do what we do and educate and bring them into our community, or take them to these things, they may not enjoy it at first, but as they grow older and as they mature, hopefully they will appreciate what the tradition of their forefathers were. It would be a shame if, say, down the road there was no one spoke Portuguese that lived in this country, or they just forgot what the Holy Ghost was about. They forgot what Lady of Fatima was about. They forgot what Festa San Juan was about. They would forget these things, or they would have what's important is having the Queen and the Father dressed up in the parade. No, what's important is that you help the elderly, you feed the person, you maintain that tradition that you learned back home, that this is not for you, it's for the people that are out there, people that can't, maybe they have a little problem, they can't feed themselves. That's what you're doing it for, and that's what where our country was founded on. So that's what I'd like to see down the road, is for us to continue that tradition. And I think we're going in the right direction. And it's very hard sometimes, because as a teenager, I remember what it was like when my father would take me, and like, I don't want to go. Don't tell me I have. And so you go like, okay, but come on, just try it once, and hopefully, maybe try it twice, maybe try it 3 times, and hopefully that by encouraging, but not forcing them, because you can't force something on someone, but by encouraging them, and with doing something like this, where there's people that come out here and they speak, they can go to a library and they can see a book on what it was about. That would maybe catch some interest in them, that they'll go, hey, that's what my grandfather did, or that's what my dad did. Maybe I'll try it. And then they can carry that onto their children. And that way, none of our traditions ever die. One of the things that we're trying to do is to bring back that the traditional feast, not to go and to show yourself as something special, to show off how much money you have, or I spent so much money on a cape for my daughter, or I spent so much money on this suit, I'm all dressed up, look at me, I'm Mr. Important. What we're trying to do is to bring back that feeling of everybody being the same. And when you show up, you walk into that hall, you sit down, you're going to be served the same way everyone else is going to be served. That there's no special person, even though everyone is special. So instead of having the queen, we have no queen. We have, everybody's a king, everybody's a queen. Everyone's treated equally. There's no person that's being elevated. There's no person with the little crown, with the cape, with the hat, and everything, marching down the street. So that, which is fine, that's what they want to do. That's not what we want. We want to have everybody feel special.